Olá, meus amores! Antes de tudo, gratidão por você estar presente para mais um conteúdo. Eu estou passando aqui rapidinho para lembrar de curtir agora esse vídeo, se inscrever no canal, ativar o sininho para não perder nenhum vídeo incrível que trazemos aqui para você. Combinado? Agora, apertem os cintos, entre na nave estelar e bora pra aventura!
Welcome everyone. I am here with Dan, Willis, about crystals, crystal technology, but let us start by the very beginnings. This is the first class on how to choose the right crystal. Dan Willis, I'm very delighted to do that with you. Welcome, and can share a little bit how you got into crystal world.
Oh, this is such a pleasure to do this with you. How exciting that we're bringing galactic knowledge of the use of crystals, to the people of our planet. I got involved in this an unusual experience back in 1977. I had a Kundalini opening, and I had this being that you later identified as an emether, which is one of the Council of Five. And he projected in space a sphere. And as I observed, there was geometries within the sphere. And what he was doing was conveying the geometry of the matrix. And this left a burning passion in me to try to understand more about what this was about. And so I sought out in the early 1980s Dr. Marcel Vogel, who was IBM's head scientist, who set up a laboratory to research crystals. And what's fascinating is, he had this vision, this dream that came to him when he started working with crystals, trying to make it more effective. And he saw this dipyramidal form, like a tree of life. And one end was like near a 52-degree angle, like the Great Pyramid, and the other end was like a 60-degree angle. And it just so happens that this is the same geometries they use on the planet Era by the Palladians. So anyway, it's a long story. I drove to the mines in Arkansas and brought back a huge batch of crystals, and Marcel was like cutting them in his garage, for these 24 medical doctors. And I helped procure some of the laboratory equipment and worked with the techniques that he taught on how to use healing on others and healing on self using the crystal with a particular technique. And I had a lot of success with it, what he taught me. And decades go by. And last year, in the year 2022, I'm so grateful for you to connect with Thorhan's younger brother, Jenhan Aredian. And you proposed to him that, here their science is thousands of years ahead of what we have here on Earth, especially in the technology of crystals. And he started answering these questions that we started relaying, you and I, back and forth in a question and answer session. We now have, since April of last year, over 111 pages of question and answer, which I put up on marcelvogel.org. And it was amazing that we discovered that what Jenhan shared matched the laboratory research work that Dr. Marcel Vogel discovered. And in fact, we did that show, changing the planetary timeline, making a positive impact on that. And we had a great response. That was an incredible show that corroborated what Marcel discovered and what Jenhan shared with us. And so, taking the knowledge of what Dr. Marcel Vogel developed, we are taking that and expanding it to even another level to share with the people of Earth. And I am, very, very honored that the Galactic Federation of Worlds has authorized the sharing of this information, and that it is my hope and desire that the people using crystal technology will use it for the healing self and healing others, and healing the planet. When you understand that we are fractals of source and that we're creative, and that the crystal is a tool that allows you to go in to the planetary matrix and instill a positive timeline with love. And that's what Marcel discovered, was that with love, and what Jenhan said as well, that it transcends, and it's most powerful because it's connected to source love. And the material of quartz, he said it was the well, I'll let you share that, what Jenhan said, what the material of quartz actually is, which it's interesting because you and I know throughout history, throughout the world, quartz has been used in sacred means in different cultures, but it hasn't had the scientific understanding until currently.
Yes, I believe we had this technology before. We knew about how to use quartz to not only heal, but also produce energy, and even act on modifying the matrix of reality, which we delve in depth in a previous video you and I did with Marcel Vogel and Jenhan's corroborating knowledge. Crystals, I mean, quartz especially, Jenhan told us that it is of the same frequency as love, and as also light, and as the creative frequency of source. So with crystals, we hold, when you hold a crystal in your hand, you hold a tremendous power. It's like you are able to do anything you want if you know how to use it. So let's start by size of a crystal. Before talking about the size, I think it's maybe better to talk about the types of crystals. What are the different types of crystals that are available to us, and what's the difference?
Yes, there's many different types of crystals on our planet. Quartz happens to be the most abundant of them. Different crystals have different elements in them, so they have different geometries, and therefore they each have a specific function. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, amethyst, all have their qualities to them. But the clear quartz is exceptional in that it's universal. It resonates with everything. In fact, Jen Han said that it resonates with source, and that it acts as an interdimensional bridge, and that water and love are all part of this core fractal geometry that they all interact with. So water, quartz, and love are like they interface naturally with each other, and that's why it's important to use love when you work with a crystal.
So quartz and natural quartz, or cut or raw, it's one type. And what do we find else at our disposal?
Well, crystals, as they grow in nature, you know, like this. What's curious is that this one's not as heavy to hold. All these angles, what are they? They're around 52 degrees. Jen Han gives specifically 51.843 to be exact. He's very exacting. It's the same exact angle as the Great Pyramid, something you're very familiar with, being an Egyptologist. So there is a whole lot that goes into this geometry and how it interfaces with the matrix and the relationship of the golden mean ratio, which resonates into infinity. There's different types of crystals. There's also, you know, they grow crystals in laboratories. You know, they start with a seed and they use a highly saturated solution, and they can become very very pure in the structure, but they are missing an element of the crystals grow over millions of years, and so they have this infusion of the matrix, of the planetary matrix within the structure of the crystal. So the natural crystal has that, which a synthetic crystal doesn't, but that doesn't mean that the synthetic crystals can't be useful as well.
Yes. Yes, I remember Jen Han saying this. Yes, I
remember. The crystals can be, Marcel found that he always used to say to me, you know, these sciences are akin to those that we know in normal physics. And in normal physics, the technology of a laser, which was actually developed from extraterrestrial technology, has like a ruby crystal in the middle with two mirrors, and they photon excite it, and the energy oscillates back and forth between these two mirrors. And one mirror completely reflects, and the other one's 99%. And at 1% is strong enough to cut through steel. This is the power of the lasing effect. Now, so Marcel started to cut the crystals as a, he started with a four-sided, I believe he was going with a four-sided crystal because it's like the Great Pyramid has four sides on it. And then he started going to more sides. Then he went to like a six-sided crystal. And he felt that the number of sides increased the spin. And then he went to like here's an 8-sided crystal. That was one of his favorites to use. And kept on going up to more sides. This is like a 16-sided. But he missed something in the progression of creating more sides on the crystal. And that is that he didn't respect the hexagonal lattice of the crystal. What you want to do is always work in alignment with nature. And the natural structure of a quartz crystal is always hexagonal. And so Jenhan made it clear that if you cut the crystal with the 52-degree angle on one end and the 60-degree angle on the other end, something that Marcel didn't know about that he would have been very excited to learn, and that is that each pyramidal termination created a spinning vortex, and they're going in opposite directions, and they come together into a phase conjunction node that these two vortices, that when you stimulate the piezoelectric lattice structure by either physical pressure or electronic pulses, in other words, you can physically squeeze the crystal, what happens is that it opens up this vortex eye of the crystal, which opens into the singularity. And Jenhan said that it connects into the void, which is, in other words, you can connect to any place in time and space, any dimension, anything. It's like a this gateway that is opened within the crystal, that the six-sided crystal has this capability that Jenhan has shared.
Yes, and Jenhan told, I'm going to read, be his voice for how he explains how a quartz crystal is in interface with everything. So I am going to read his words now. Jenhan said, the core holographic structure of quartz, the purest material in the universe, is based on the same core fractal formula than water, and both are interdimensional bridges. Crystals can store data just as water does, because constructed on the same fractal core formula. But crystals have way more capacities. Of course, they are the most elaborate state of matter. So elaborate that it naturally embeds consciousness. A crystal is a bridge because it exists in all dimensions at a time. Natural uncut crystals work when they are not altered. What I mean is no breaks and cracks in the angles. It must be complete. We visited an Altian craft recently. That is why I am visiting this star system, to learn more about their terraforming science and the way they use crystals in their ships. Notably, the walls in the common areas are made with natural crystals, but they are impeccable with unaltered angles. Otherwise, they wouldn't bridge the densities.
Now, you had a personal experience, didn't you?
Yes, I went a few times on board an Altian ship. And the first time I was shocked. You know, when you connect with a higher intelligence civilization, you think you are going to see some architecture even more futuristic and pure lines, and the walls were made with clusters of crystals. It wasn't cut out in crystal. No, it was crystal points that were sticking out of the walls, and that was the walls.
Organic looking.
Organic looking. That was extraordinary. Even entering into the ship, it was, I cannot get away from this idea that it was entering in the canal of a womb. I had this thought because the ship was alive and it was crystals everywhere inside. And when I couldn't understand why it was so organic looking, and I was explained later, as Jenhan told us also, that in these ships there are people from different densities living at the same time in the same commons. So, in order for them to live in the same physicality, instead of in the Galactic Federation of Worlds wearing density belts or environmental suits. No, what they do, it's that it's the architecture, it's the ship that does that. It bridges all densities and dimensions together by the crystals. Crystals are able to do that. So if you have a being of 6 density, it can walk physically in that ship beside a being of a 5th density. And they both are physical. They can shake hands and whatever. So yes, I had this personal experience and it's a revelation to me. A revelation that, well, I need to go back in thinking a bit more about crystals. So here we are.
The whole idea of crystals bridging multiple densities, we are aware that reality is made up of multiple densities. And this is the key factor that I believe was used when Marcel was working with these doctors with these healing procedures. And, you know, the first time I met with him, I was sitting on a couch with a doctor and he dematerialized this tumor on this girl's ankle. I mean, it went out of 3D, you know, I pulled the rug out from under it, which shows that the higher density creates the lower densities. The lower does not create the higher. And so when you're able to bridge the densities and with your consciousness, you know, we'll get into that in a future class with, you know, healing. And in fact, we're going to expand upon the known effective healing methodologies that Marcel was able to use with the knowledge of Jenhan, who, you know, they're thousands of years in ahead of our technological understanding. But this whole idea of bridging densities with the crystal is a key in understanding how you can experience these rapid transformations in the 3D world through interfacing your consciousness. And now consciousness, as we and Marcel and Jenhan both confirm this, that said that tetrahedral fractal geometry is the secret of the universe, and that when we think thoughts, they're each a complex geometric pattern that's being projected and going into this matrix. And so when you're able to bridge the densities and interface your consciousness with it, it has a very profound effect.
Yes, Dan, and imagine this a source which is the highest density in all universes. In our universe, in our dimension, it's the 13th level of density of matter. That's what creates all the sub-densities beneath it. And our consciousness is a fractal source consciousness. So when we connect with who we truly are, when we become our consciousness and we vibrate in the frequency of our consciousness, the body doesn't exist, whatever. Well, we have this power. And when we use a quartz, it totally bridges it. And it helps bridging the frequency level of source through our consciousness in 3D matter. And that's why crystals are absolutely crucial tools. We need to know more about them. And where can we find them on Earth? You the main the main places where we.
Well, people can you can go online and you can get just a simple crystal point. You can spend $5 or $15 or whatever for just a single crystal point. But
Regions,
and
yeah, the
and
regions.
it's cool. It's quartz, so it does work. But Jen had said something very, very specific about the difference between a natural crystal point and a Vogel cut crystal is what they call it. And I'll let you read that one.
Yes, I actually have it here. You were asking Jen Han, are the Vogel cut crystals significantly more powerful than a natural single quartz crystal points for doing this work? Jen Han said, "Oh yes, they are if it is cut rightly, in perfect alignment with the grid of the lattice. Natural raw quartz are, of course, effective, but the Vogel cut, as you name them, are a more surgical tool to operate into the fabric of space-time and universal consciousness."
If only they only costed $5.
I know, right?
But to cut a crystal so that it is cut along, there's several requirements that have to be met by the lapidarius that cuts the crystal, and a consciousness that's behind the intention of the one that's cutting the crystal. You want to cut it according to the growth axis. They call it the C axis. It's so that so that the tips on both ends are perfectly aligned with the growth axis where the energy spirals down. And also you want to cut in alignment with the hexagonal core of the crystal so that the 6 sides are aligned with the lattice structure of the crystal. Especially on the 6-sided type crystal. And so it takes a lot of skill, and not all the materials are perfectly, clear, it becomes quite expensive. So I've been working with, you and I just want to make it clear, we have absolutely no financial interest. We're not crystal sellers or anything like that. We're strictly wanting to teach the people how to utilize these technologies, for benevolent purposes. But there's a couple that has a business called Crystal Light and Sound, and they have instructed their cutters to cut the crystals for the 6-sided in the specification that Jen Han, they love the information we've been getting, and so their crystals on the 6-sided, they range, from small, medium to large. The smaller one is actually quite nice. It's under $150, which is, when you consider Vogel cut crystals can go into several hundreds and even thousands of dollars. And it has the specific requirements that are required to make it effective. And on marcelvogel.org, I have a link there if somebody wants to acquire a crystal. That's a recommendation. But you can find crystals all across the internet. Vogel crystal is amazing. It's like what Marcel started. You'll find Vogel crystals everywhere across the planet. But you want to make sure that they're cutting it according to the correct specification, and that they're cutting it in the C-axis, they're cutting it in alignment, they're at the 52-degree angle is correct, and the 60-degree angle is correct. And so, it's a little bit of a gamble, but there's a difference between a Vogel cut crystal, quote unquote, and a Vogel inspired crystal. A Vogel cut crystal is one that's the lapidaris has been trained in specifically cutting Vogel cut crystals to the specification. So if you're getting a Vogel cut crystal, you can rest assured that you're getting the correct specifications of the crystal, but you'll be paying for it. It's quite a bit of money to get that. So you have an option. You have a Vogel inspired crystal, which is cut by talented lapidaris that have been given the instructions on the correct ways of doing it. And so it's considerably less money, which makes it affordable, for some people. So, as you go up in size, you can go from, a small crystal, which is kind of nice. It'll do the job. It fits ergonomically in your hand. You want to get a crystal that is comfortable, not only resonates with you, but is ergonomically comfortable in your hand. Like this is like a medium size. And then you have, monster size crystals.
Yeah, you want to be able to manipulate it and turn it like easily, without being stressed of dropping it. Something that you can. Well,
that large crystal, by the way, I'm working with two teams of scientists from the information Jenhan has given, and we're constructing a frill generator. Frill is like the life force of the universe. They use it on the planet Era. Jenhan's sister actually works at one of the stations that has a pyramid, and the crystal is there with the special pulsating energy that generates the frill, and then it's sent wirelessly across the planet, and they power everything with this. And they even use this technology to power their starships, these with the torsion fields. So I mean, it's quite an honor to be able to bring this technology, to our planet that could be used for very benevolent purposes.
Absolutely. And so when you choose a crystal for doing this work, we really recommend its quartz. There are all other colors of crystals and structures like amethyst, citrine, rose quartz, and all the rest are all good for different specific works. But if you want to work with the lattice of the universe, manifest your reality, bridge densities, do all these things, it's quartz for its frequency. And when choosing quartz, Dan, people can get confused. Will I pick a quartz that comes from Arkansas, Himalaya, Brazil? Do you know the difference between the quality of the quartz from this provenance?
Some people have preferences on the regions, Himalayan quartz versus Madagascar. During World War II, the Brazilian quartz was sought after because during the war, it was actually instrumental in winning the war with the Nazis, or so we thought anyway. That it allowed an exact frequency oscillation for the radio transmitters and so forth. So because it had a high quality of piezoelectric ability, the piezoelectric is basically, you have like a 6-pointed star with charge centers in the middle. One triangle is positive, one's negative. And so what happens when electrical pulse or physical pressure happens, it offsets these charge centers just a little bit, causes thousands of volts to be generated because you have trillions of these that are being offset. And so that's the piezoelectric effect, where either physical pressure or electronic pulse will oscillate the lattice and generate a electrical charge on the outside of the crystal. And you can actually, Marcel used to do something where you take your finger and you run it across it. When you charge the crystal, you could feel like it sticks a little bit, because there's this charge on the surface of the crystal.
Yeah, a little bit like, is it a little bit like statics or something like this?
Yeah, something like that.
And what I want to say, yes, when choosing a crystal as well, well, Brady, thank you for these precisions. I think it's very, very helpful. When choosing a crystal, I think also, beside all the technical knowledge that you need to have about what you just explained, Dan, there's also the intuition that works. You know, when I choose a crystal, I always say, and many people say, "Oh, it's the crystal who chose me," and because of the frequency. Your frequency is going to interface with the frequency of a crystal in a shop or even online. You know, you browse, and why this one is not the most beautiful, it's not the cheapest, it's not, but it's the one, you know. That's so that I always let my intuition guide me. The first I saw usually is the one that is going to come home with me. How does it work with you, Dan, the intuition?
Oh, yeah, intuition. Oh, it's a good thing to pay attention to. You know,
Yeah.
it's always talking to you. And you know, regarding the size, remember the lattice structure of the quartz. You know, even with a small crystal, is massive within. So the difference is that a larger crystal has a more capacity to do a little bit more like that. But don't underestimate a smaller crystal to be able to have a powerful effect.
Does it need to be clear, or it can have some clouds and stuff in it?
As we learned from Junhan, that where and he showed you in a diagram where the angles of the two terminations, they come out like this and like this, and where they meet in the center is the eye of the crystal. And he said it was, and you can have inclusions in the other areas of the crystal, but you want to keep this region where the two vortices come together. You want to have that fairly clear.
Yes, and I'm going to read quickly what Jen Han said, because we have, I think, a year of conversations with him, and there's a lot of. So this is a little excerpt of a question he answered about a question you asked about the clarity of the quartz, and this is what he said. So Jen Han said in response regarding a question about inclusion, is this a quartz inclusion? So it has the same frequency as the host crystal and it doesn't disturb the flux. If it was a different material, it would be annoying, but it doesn't seem it is. Also, it is not anywhere near the vortex zone, so I think your crystal is good, Dan.
Yeah, I had an inclusion in the crystal, and it was actually this one. It has a little inclusion on the tip, but it doesn't affect the vortex, because the vortex is in this area here. So the original crystals that Marcel was cutting for the 24 medical doctors, they weren't inclusion free by any means. They were effective, and the doctors had amazing experiences with the techniques Marcel trained them with. So Yeah, and the other crystals, in recognition that there's many different types of Vogel crystals. He started with a 4, 6, 8, 12, and so forth. I'd like to read something that Marcel said about the number of sides, because that's a big
That's
question
important.
that
Yes.
everybody says, well, how many sides should I get? And what's the difference between them? And this is what Marcel said. He maintained that the 4, 6, 8, and 12-sided healing crystals were the complete set of healing instruments. He focused primarily on the 4, 6, and 8. Anything beyond this was of little value for this form of service, he said. Ramida, who's worked closely with him, who unfortunately recently just passed away, he said, I once showed him a 24-sided crystal, and he said it was very nice work, but it was primarily an ego crystal. By this, he meant that it satisfied one's need for more and bigger, An exception would be for the purpose of channeling or subjective communication. Still, individuals gravitate to whatever their intuition guides them for their particular needs, as we were just saying. When a crystal becomes too highly faceted in a Vogel pattern, the energetic spin is reduced, and the result is often less rather than more. Some crystals are so multifaceted that they are virtually cylinders. I know some people have 144. Even one person has 377 sides, thinking, oh, this is going to be the super powerful crystal, But unfortunately, still, the geometrical patterning of the crystal has an effect. But the information described here regarding Marcel Vogel's research and the treatment protocol does not necessarily apply to crystals over 14 sides, he was saying. Now, Jenhan was much more generous with that. And I asked him about, I said to him, does increasing the number of facets of a multifaceted Vogel crystal yield a greater amplification, as Dr. Marcel Vogel assumed? Jenhan said, should I read this, or would you like to do this?
Yes. Well, you can read it. You can read it if you want.
Okay. Jenhan said no. He said it will magnify the healing power by radiance. The crystals that are multifaceted to an extreme are transmitting life energy by radiance, but they are not the most effective when opening the eye of the crystal, as we were talking about earlier, because the dynamics is lost. You need to respect the structure of the lattice and always cut in perfect ratio with the hexagonal core structure. This is really key, what he's saying. The efficient shape of these crystals do not only concern the correct degree of the two pyramidal extremities, but as well the lateral ratio, the facets. Everything must be in harmony with the core lattice, vertically and laterally. Every crystal works for healing, whatever the shape, because quartz does what quartz does. It realigns the atoms in an ordered state of matter. It transcends it. When you use a quartz that is cut following its lattice, it becomes a precise, powerful surgical tool. As I said previously, the 6-sided ones are the most efficient for most of the work. A greater number of sides works for healing only, because it is not about the shape anymore, but about the very nature of the quartz. That is why I previously told you that Vogel cut crystals were more effective at 6 sides for everything. But the greater number of sides only works for healing and clairvoyance as well. Not because of its shape anymore, but because the properties of quartz. It will always be better than a raw quartz, but when there are so many sides, it becomes a faceted cylinder. There is no point. it is not worth investing more currency, so money, into a great. I was asking him about this, because people spend a lot of money on multifaceted crystals, thinking, oh, it's going to be more powerful, but it's not so. In a greatly faceted crystal, a 4, 6, 8, and 12 matter. The more efficient is 6-sided. You will always have a more powerful effect when the crystal is cut following the C-axis, but it's best using the numbers I gave you. Too much facets lose the focus of the beam. The lattice of the crystal is too much interfered in its dynamics. As I was saying, they are healer crystals, but compared to near cylindrical shape dynamics, the more it tends toward it, it loses its power. 4, 6, 8, 12, even 24, we went far greater than Marcel, works. So those people have a 24-sided, it still works for you, so don't worry. Afterwards, the vortex effect decreases. So, to summate, what Marcel and Jenhan both corroborated pretty closely on this whole idea of the effect of the number of sides on the crystal. Because they both said that for a healing crystal, 4, 6, 8, and 12-sided works. Marcel believed that the vortex energetic spin reduced after 14 sides, but Jenhan stated, and he knows quite a bit, being a star maker, terraforms planets. The vortex spin reduces above 24 sides. For both a healing crystal and for opening the eye of the crystal, Jenhan said that the 6-sided that's cut in respect to the hexagonal core structure of the crystal is the most efficient for doing everything. So that answers the question. Many people ask that question. It's like, how many sides? Know that if you have a multi-sided Vogel under 24 sides, that it works as a healing crystal, and it uses the radiance because of the quartz. That the 6-sided has extra attributes that we've recently learned about.
Yes, and we were always impressed by the corroboration. The Marcel and Jenhan. I mean, they pretty much all the time come to the same conclusions. And Jenhan has been, of course, he's more in touch with all this technology, and he went a little step further. And we, with all our work with him, well, my work was only to pass on the messages, but you worked behind with the crystal cutters, with all the knowledge that Marcel shared and scientists. And from this collaboration, wonderful collaboration, something was born. The Vogel Iridium crystal. So, can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, we call it the in honor of Marcel, who originally came up with the concept, and in honor of Jenhan Iridion, we call it a Vogel Iridion, because this is one thing that Marcel was not aware of, about cutting it not only vertically but laterally in respect to the hexagonal core of the crystal, that allows this incredible ability of the crystal in order to connect to all points in time and space, multiple dimensions. In fact, one of the methods of opening up this eye of the crystal is not only we'll get into this in a future class, but you and I both have these crystals that we have signal generators, which are using silver electrodes that are pulsing the crystals. And you had an amazing thing happen, with John Charles, when you accidentally, or it just happened to leave your crystal activated and your vortex was open, and yeah, you might want to share that. I think it's an incredible.
Okay, it was very funny. You know, we finally understood why it was happening my side and it hadn't happened your side. Because my settings, that's a replica of my settings. It's with another crystal, but I have candle holders and I have a bigger one in which I set up the six-sided vogel, which I'm working done. That's only for decoration or something else, just to put it safe. So in fact it was a metallic structure that did a Faraday cage, and that just
Wow.
the energy of the crystal just bounced in it and just concentrated it. That's what we understood, because it's when we ask a question, is Elena's setting the right settings? Jen had never seen my settings, so through Thorhan we shared my vision of my installation of my crystal. And Jen Hans saw it for the first time. He said, "Oh, that's the metal structure around it. It interferes with the piezoelectric effect. It just concentrates it. That's why it opened a vortex." So it's not safe to play with these things without really knowing what you're doing. But what happened
True.
twice, yeah, it's very important. Do not play with that without knowing what you're doing. And we'll come to that in our classes. But yeah, when we were stimulating we were doing that together, Dan, via Zoom, one of us with our crystals, and stimulating the eye of the crystal by electrical pulses and silver coins at the height of the vortex eye. And on my side, something happened. I felt the air, the energy change in the room, and I heard voices. And the voices were in a language I couldn't understand. So maybe it's inner earth people, maybe it's a parallel dimension, I don't know. And when I cut the pulse, it just closed. And that was strange. And then I tried it again a month later. I was just putting it on and I said myself, "Oh, it will energize the room and see what happens." So I left it. I went into the kitchen. I heard Japanese music coming from the living room where the crystal was. And the cats heard it at the same time as me. And they went, "What's that?" They ran to it and suddenly felt something. And it was coming from the crystal like a transistor. And I don't know what happened. It was my emotion, my consciousness. It just stopped when I was so emotional. So what's going on? And it just stopped. And at the same time, I knew later that Jean-Charles, with whom I'm connected, because we've been doing teleportations together and working together, and we're good friends. He was at that same time, because Jean-Charles as well he has abilities with his mind without any technology to teleport or transpose his consciousness. And he was working on his movie or video, and he was listening to Japanese music. And he thought, "Oh, Elena would love this music." So he thought about me at the time. And it was the same music. We could compare. I could find on YouTube a music that was kind of similar. And he said, "Yes, that's very similar to what I was listening to." So you can, these, I mean, people, crystals, so powerful, and you really need to know what you're doing with it. So that's why we are taking it step by step. What were your impressions, Dan, when I told you this story with Jean-Charles and the Japanese music?
Oh, yeah, it's I thought, wow, in fact, I asked Jenny, is this a way to use for telepathy? We know that he had to get special permission. It was the only second time he had to get special permission from authorization from the higher command. We know that John Charles' gamma brainwave production is off the charts.
Yes. Yes.
And Jenhan has stressed the importance that when we do this work with crystals, it's important to be in gamma brainwave. It's the most effective. And yeah, I asked John Charles to send me the MP3 and I shared it with you. And you're in a remote, rural area of Ireland. And it's like you don't have like, Japanese music, playing
No,
around you.
you know, the first thing before running to the living room, I just looked by the window if there was no cars or people, with transistors outside. But as soon as I saw there was no one, it's coming from the living room.
So the amazing abilities and capabilities that can happen with a crystal when you open the vortex within it, we're just discovering more, and that's just one example. And like Elena said, this is not something to play around with, because if you activate a crystal like that and you go with a large crystal, it's more of a concern than a smaller crystal. But the crystal starts to sing, it will transcend light and implode, and it could be. But for the most part, it's quite harmless. And when you're using when we were asking Jenhan about activating the eye, he was saying about pressing, and then he said we can't press 20 times a second our fingers, and so there's this electronic method that you can use, but that's in another class in the future.
So I think we've been around all the points we wanted to talk about picking the right crystal. To recapitulate, and the whole advice we give to the audience about how to pick the right crystal, what would you recommend, the bullet points?
It all depends on what your budget is and what you plan to do, or is this something that's just a passing thing, or is it something you want to invest something into to really get into the science of this technology? It's an individual basis on that. What are they going to say? I wanted to mention that the 60-degree angle, I find it interesting. The Egyptian obelisks, the points are 60 degrees. If you take a tetrahedron, which Jenhan said is this tetrahedral fractal geometry is the secret of the universe. The sending end of the crystal, the 60 degrees, all the angles within a tetrahedron just happen to be 60 degrees. So it's a matter of form resonance, so that you're resonating with the matrix itself. And we'll go more into the 52-degree angle and the 60-degree in a future class. But I recommend our friends at Crystal Light and Sound. They offer crystals that have been instructed by their cutters to cut the hexagonal in relationship to the hexagonal core of the crystal. And there's some good deals across the internet, but it's always a gamble whether or not you'll get something of the correct. Use your intuition. Again, we're not crystal salespeople, but we want to educate and empower the people of our beloved planet here to bring this technology into awareness and into a way that can benefit life on this planet.
And it is time we know about these technologies that we have been made forgetful about. These technologies before were used on Earth. and now it is time. They're back. So we are taking you by the hand, and we are looking forward to see you the next class with your favorite crystal. We're going to do some magic.
Yeah, that's right. We did that one video where we had, I think it was like 1,700 people live, and we actually spiked the Schumann resonance. Some people had a glass of water, some people had a little crystal in their hand. Very few had a Vogel Radion type of crystal. We know that the square root of 1% to less than 9,000 people can affect the entire planetary matrix of all 8 billion people on this planet. And so just imagine, in the future, if we had an army of crystal users that were all envisioning this beautiful positive timeline, and they imprinted it into the matrix, I think it might have quite an effect.
Yes, and anything you learn, you pass it on. We all are the medium through which the knowledge is passed on. So whatever you learn here, just pass it on. Talk about it. Teach others. Share this video, and this will contribute to change this world into.
We have some very exciting classes ahead, which I'm going to be asking Jen Han to expand upon the healing procedures Marcel was able to develop and were effective, and so and much more. So stay tuned.